Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin and Karina, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, and we are back. I'm with Coach Karina. Hey, everybody. And today's podcast is going to be slightly controversial.
Yes.
Or touchy, or however you want to... What was another word? You used another word before. What was it?
I thought it was touchy.
Okay, maybe you did say that. It's going to be a very nuanced discussion, which is why it's going to be a two-part.
I think nuance is a good way to put this.
Yeah, which is like every podcast. I mean, hello.
Yeah.
We don't just do podcasts that aren't nuanced, because that is why we love actually doing the podcast, because topics like this can be taken so topically and can be taken so out of context.
And very like black and white.
Yes, which this is the definition of a not black and white podcast. This should be very nuanced in its understanding. And that is the health at every size movement. So if you've seen it, it'll typically be capitalized HAES. And we wanted to just do the first part on, okay, what is this? What are some of our thoughts on it? And then do a second podcast on basically balancing flexibility and rigidity in your diet and understanding how to use both and how they kind of play into this. So first part will just kind of be about it, and then the second part will be the kind of coaching.
Yeah, I think this podcast, at least the kind of the intro portion, is going to be very important because I didn't really know that it was an actual movement. Like I'd kind of seen it on social media, and then my professor brought it up in class, and one of the master's classes I'm taking is the science of physique enhancement, and he kind of had to address it, and I was like, oh, like this is a very serious thing. So very appropriate that I think we're doing a podcast on it, kind of giving our thoughts. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'll let you take it away.
So, we went on the Health at Every Size website. So I wanted, the initial stuff will be a little bit more, bullet pointy, right? We want to talk about
we want to lay down the facts as what it is.
Yes. Here's what they say. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we're also going to talk about some obesity statistics too, straight from the CDC. So just straight stats. So first we'll talk about the Health at Every Size. Basically, the short version of it is rejecting both the use of size, weight, or BMI as proxies for health, and the myth that weight is a choice. This is on their website. And then basically the way that they look at this is like a 5-pronged approach. They talk about weight inclusivity, health enhancement, respectful care, eating for well-being, and life-enhancing movement. So understandably, where did this come from, right? Health at every size, typically what we'll see is there's a lot of backlash between, there used to be, hey, thinness is the best thing, obsessiveness with your weight control, obsessiveness with what you eat.
God, there used to be Inspo pages back in the day.
There might still be.
I'm sure there still is. But I feel like that was the big thing.
Yeah, there's always going to be a market for stuff like that, right? There's always going to be a market for everything. Let's be honest. But one of those things, that used to be very, very, that was the only norm, right? And, understandably, that's not appropriate. There are going to be different body sizes. There's going to be different body types. Even me, if we're going off of BMI, right? I am overweight. I would fall into the overweight category. Clearly, I know that I am not overweight or over fat, but just based on BMI. And when people look at BMI, we were joking about this earlier, but the reality is we're looking at BMI on a population level, right? We're not talking about the BMI of people who resistance train and have a lot of muscle mass. Yes, for those people, BMI is not going to be the best indicator, because then somebody like myself is considered overweight. Ryan, I think, is morbidly obese based on his statistics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think people don't understand that we are such a small part of the population, and obviously when you're just in the world all the time, you're oh, everybody is like this, and No.
This is not the majority of people. That would be great to think like that. But as another example, there are going to be just different body types, right? Some people are going to be on the leaner, thinner end, no matter what they do. We all know people like that, right? Like they're just smaller, they're more petite, and that's just kind of what they look like. Other people are just going to be bigger people. Like for my dad, for example, right? My dad is in very good shape. My dad watches what he eats, just because like my family eats super healthy. He's really active, but he used to be an offensive lineman as a football player, right? So he's just like bigger guy. And now as an adult, clearly no longer plays football, but he's in good shape, and he's 6'4" and probably like 265, like 270, right? And so you'd be like, oh my God, that's huge. But it's like, if you see my dad, you just think he looks like a normal dude.
Like a normal, very tall man.
He's just like a larger guy,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's not like, and like one time I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, you should be like 200 pounds. And he was just like laughing. He's like, do you see me? He's like, Doc, I'm not ever be 200 pounds, right? But then I know people who are 6'4" and they're 200 pounds and they also look normal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the whole idea behind this is really great, right? Like we want different body types within, the health space, not just health. We want basically different body types to be accepted everywhere, which is totally understandable and a great goal.
Of course, and there's and like just back to kind of like the where thin was the goal. That's not the goal, right?
No.
Because you can be healthy at thicker than thin. However, what I think, obviously, this very nuanced topic can get taken way out of hand, in which I have seen kind of ignore the importance of, oh, you're on the borderline of metabolic syndrome, you need to do something about this.
Yes.
But
it is, so that's why we wanted to have some of these stats, right? Just as pure statistics, right? So this is only the US population, but I just wanted to pull that up for relevancy. So between 2017 and 2018, 42.7% of the population was obese. And again, this is going off of BMI. I don't know where they get all these records. There's obviously lots of things, right? But this is from the CDC.gov website. From 1999 to 2000 to then 2017 to 2018, so 18-year gap. Obesity increased from 30.5% to then 42.4%. Severe obesity increased from 4.7 to 9.2%. Obesity-related conditions that we typically see when people are obese, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer, are also the leading causes of preventable and premature death in the US. These are just stats, right? The estimated annual medical cost of obesity is $147 billion in the United States. And the reason for that, or one of the reasons, is that the medical cost for obesity is $1,429 higher for somebody who is obese versus normal weight. And this, of course, is due to, doctor visits, medications, etc.
Just
right?
like the proxy of everything else that comes with being obese.
Exactly. You have type 2 diabetes, you need to have medication to manage that. Obviously, we can go to a whole podcast on that. You could certainly have lifestyle and diet changes that would eliminate a lot of those. Maybe not ever eliminate though, right? Like there's a lot of things here. So just looking at the statistics, right? We understand completely where the health at every size movement is coming from. But where I feel like sometimes it can get lost in the weeds is it focuses a lot on just body acceptance without looking at what is your body actually healthy or not. And this is not to say that you have to be a thin person to be healthy, because we know that has been debunked and that is not true. Again, I'm technically overweight. Ryan is technically obese. We are both healthy people, right?
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that, you can be heavier and be healthy, but we have to make sure that those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, and then on the other end of the spectrum, I know you just went over like all these obesity statistics to kind of cover, not all these consequences come from being okay with being obese, But again, on the other side, not super healthy for everyone to be severely skinny either. So
oh no, there's tons of issues there too.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess where we wanted to get with this topic is like when it's body acceptance at the extremes, like you have to be careful there. And I feel like that's where it gets dangerous, because that's what I see on social media a lot. And it's like, no, like, yeah, love yourself, right? Cool. But love yourself enough to want better for yourself, whether that is to lose weight, that's okay. Like, whether it's to gain weight, that's okay too. Whether it's to maintain your weight, move more, meditate more, whatever that looks like. But
we also need to talk about the mental health side of it. And one of the things too is, that they've seen that there's poor mental health outcomes coincided with obesity. And then, as we know, of course, if somebody is not eating properly, not exercising, not taking care, of these very fundamental things for health, they are going to be in a less optimal mental health standpoint, right? Perspective. Same thing goes for very underweight. Obviously, when somebody's very underweight, they have other mental health. Usually they can be the same thing, right? But now they've just gone in different directions. And one of the biggest problems, and I feel like this is what happens particularly on social media, but just anywhere, like anytime there's a good intention, but it's a very extreme, notion, like, hey, we just need to accept where we're at, indefinitely.
I think, social media takes it to the extremes.
Yes,
go ahead.
It just, lights on fire, essentially.
Exactly, and I want to make sure it is very clear, we are definitely on board with the good intent that this movement has. However, we're not on board with saying, no, you're fine at being borderline type 2 diabetes. Don't do anything about that. You don't need to exercise anymore. You don't need to work on your body image and just get to a healthier body weight so you can mentally be in a good place, so you can have the self-esteem to go to the beach and things like that. And that's a serious thing, and I know because I've lived that personally. And I feel like at one point I was told oh, just love who you are, where when I was much heavier and very unhealthy. And it was basically, it felt like everyone was saying just fake it till you make it kind of thing. But and essentially lie to yourself. And I just couldn't sit with that, because no matter how many times someone told me to just accept who you are, I just didn't feel happy there, because I just didn't feel happy at that body composition. It has nothing to do with the number on the scale. I always had back problems because I was too heavy and things like that.
And you physically just didn't even feel good either,
I didn't
right?
feel good ever, and it was really tough. And so I'm at a much better place.
Give some numbers for just reference, if you don't mind.
So I am 5'3"-ish, 5'4". I don't have a ton of muscle on me.
You're so short, Karina. I should just start saying that every podcast.
Compared to you, because you're so tall. Anyways.
If this is your first episode, everybody's gonna be like, what? That was such a weird comment.
Actually, Jillian's the shortest, because I think she's 5'2". Anyways, I'm in the happy middle of no. So at that point for me, kind of what was very uncomfortable for me was at 155, almost 160. That was a lot for me. And I didn't feel good there. I would try to run, almost pass out, because I just wasn't doing a lot of activity. And in general, I had to diet when I was there. I had to move more when I was there. And so, I think that you could have told me, you should just love your body where it is. And I would be okay, but I'm still not happy. I still struggle with, self-esteem. And it's not just associated with the body composition that I was at, but I just felt horrible. And for me, I feel a lot healthier at now. I'm 133, 135 on average, and I just feel a lot more athletic. It sounds shallow, but I just feel more confident in this body that I am now, that I'm able to maintain, because I spent so many years working toward this and turning it into a lifestyle in which it took me quite a bit of time to track macros. And that helped me, because that restraint helped me kind of learn about food. And now I'm able to eat intuitively and maintain a body I'm very happy with.
And that's where one of the gripes that I have with some of this, and we're going to go through some of like the pros and cons, right? And one of the issues that I have is when people who have had years and years of experience with food, and then all of a sudden they write all of that off as like, well, this is really damaging, nobody else should do this, you should just love where you're at. Again, I understand where you're coming from, but there are people who don't have that food education. They don't have that knowledge of what to eat.
And I couldn't get to where, I don't feel like I couldn't get to where I was as far as like being so comfortable with not tracking and just feeding myself without that knowledge. And I think that it's wrong to say, because if I'm being honest, like I don't want to track macros at all right now. But just because I don't want to do something doesn't mean like a client who I think would really benefit from learning about it shouldn't do it.
And it's also, there's a difference of why do you feel like that? Because you've done it for years and you can still regulate your food intake. That's the main difference. So that what I appreciate and respect about the health at every size movement is that they're trying to get away from like, hey, everything is not just about calorie balance. Hey, everything is not just about the scale weight. And that is 100% what we preach as well as a team and as coaches. But again, you cannot ignore all of the years of food experience, food education that, you know, an individual might have had before they can get to that level, right? There are people who, like, you know, we often forget about this, right? But like we were talking about it beforehand, like people drink regular soda like it's water, right? Like they'll drink like multiple per day of just regular sodas and they don't know what's in that. And that might be literally, I mean, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but that could be 200 grams of carbs, right? And if somebody didn't have the education to know that that might be maybe not helpful for them for a variety of reasons, well, how are we now going to condemn the person to say, well, you love soda, so just like have it every day, have as much as you want, doesn't matter. Well, everything has a consequence. Right. Do you know what I mean? And you have to be able to understand what you're getting yourself into. You really love soda? Okay, have one.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Practice restraint. Learn
that you can have one, you can have part of that, but also learn what's in it and what it's doing if you have it unbridled and now you have 10.
Right.
There is a difference there. And we can't condemn people who aren't at that place yet. So when people are saying things like, you should never diet, you should never care about what you eat, you should never weigh yourself, you should well, some people might actually need that because they're in a position where they're really vulnerable, like, hey, I need to learn more about my body, I need to learn more about my nutrition. So we can't, like, if just because you've gotten on the other side of all this doesn't mean that you can judge somebody who's just starting their journey or just trying to get healthier.
Yeah, and for me, at least, you know, most of my clientele, I don't work with as many competitors as say you do. I do work with some, but I have a lot of people who tracked for a while, and I basically work with them to, you know, take what they've learned and not track anymore and live a very balanced life, more intuitively, if not 100% intuitively. And like I mentioned before, they are able to do that so easily because they've just had that education with tracking, and they're very, you know, I'm like, okay, remember when you prepped your food together? All that time you spent looking at those amounts, now just kind of eyeball the same things, but don't obsess over every gram. Don't obsess over every like ounce and weighing everything out. And my goal for most of my clients is I don't want to have to coach you forever, right? Like my goal should be to empower you to, obviously, like if you're not competing or anything like that, to empower you to be able to make decisions for yourself, because I think we can both agree that like tracking macros for the rest of your life is no way to live. However, there's a time and place, and context is super important. And I feel like what we're trying to get at with being against these extremes, it's like you should never ever track macros because it's so damaging. When like no, I have clients,
be incredibly useful, and it could literally change somebody's life.
Oh, I have clients who tracking macros and just kind of that way of staying on top of their diet has helped them to drink less when they like had a drinking problem before. You know, just be more. There are like worse things you could be obsessed with, or things like that. And call it a vice or not, I feel like if you're going to be obsessive over something, I think that being very focused on your health like isn't a bad thing.
Probably a good one.
For some context. And I would say like I have a client who this is their exact situation. Like they really struggled with drinking, but having a goal of a bodybuilding show like helped kind of say like, oh, like I can't do that to my body anymore because I need to stay on track. And after they competed, you know, they're like, oh, I don't need to do that ever again.
Yeah.
And so, like, their goal isn't to compete forever. I'm not saying that competing is going to be the Band-Aid for that, but that just, like, helped them, put them in that direction. And I don't think that's impossible.
No, and then the other thing, too, is that we think that, the Health at Every Size movement really got this right is, like we said, celebrating body diversity, celebrating different sizes, different shapes. And, there are some people who are just going to be naturally leaner than others. There's some people who are going to be naturally a little bit heavier. Some people are going to be more muscular than others. That's what we love about our team. We coach all different body types.
All of our coaches are totally different body types.
All of our coaches are different body types. All of our clients have different body types, have different goals. And that's we completely are on board with that. Like there's not
and
one.
They're all healthy, or we work to get them healthier.
Hopefully, that's our goal. They don't always come to us super healthy.
The goal is to be healthier than where they started, because obviously why would they be paying us?
Yeah, like that would be a terrible objective. But we want, everybody to be different, right? Everybody has, like I said, different goals, different backgrounds, so many different things. And that is so heartbreaking when, you do get a client update who's like, hey, I've been looking at XYZ, or, looking at these people who look a certain way. And it's like, no, like that, that's not where you're at yet, you know what I mean? And that's okay. But like you have to realize like what this other person has put in for 10 years and like maybe we'll get there.
Yeah.
So we are totally behind, not just fitting one mold, one body type, anything like that. Of course. But you also have to understand again that there are health consequences to being too small, being too lean, too low body weight, whatever you want to call it, and too big. Like those are undeniable consequences.
Right.
Being overweight and being underweight on the extreme ends are not healthy. Doesn't matter, I don't care where your mental headspace is at. That's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is physically, where are you? What do your hormones look like? What, do you have diabetes? Are you going to have, putting yourself at risk for certain types of cancer? Like, these are things that we can prevent. And again, I understand what the objective is with Health at Every Size, trying to say like, hey, there's different ways, like, eat in ways that are good for your body, move in ways that you enjoy. We're not saying that everybody needs to go out and do, a crazy competition, like, you want to go do a CrossFit competition. Just because you lift weights doesn't mean you need to go do that, right? Like, no, that's a certain goal that you want to achieve, but just getting to the gym a few days a week is perfect for most people, right? And that's amazing, and that's what we should be talking about, celebrating, pushing people towards. But we shouldn't be pushing people away from that, you know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't be saying, hey, if you want to go do these other goals, or you have these aspirations, those are now inherently bad. And that's what I don't like about this. Any type of diet, any type of mindset, any kind of whatever that is saying, hey, this one thing is inherently good and this one thing is inherently bad. And I understand, again, what they are trying to push back from, but the swing the other way is not helpful to a lot of people either.
Yeah, and we're not denying the fact that people get over obsessive with tracking macros. We're not denying the fact that...
Or the scale, or lifting weights, or literally, and you can do this with anything, step down. Yeah. Any of these things can become obsessive, how healthy you eat.
And the fact that like bodybuilding is not gonna be really great for everyone. I don't think that it was as like life enhancing for me as it was for someone else. But am I gonna say that like no one should ever compete ever? No.
And that's what I like to round this out. We just want everybody to, like, our final point to kind of bring all these things together is that like it is okay to have goals, and we always want to, push clients, or really anybody, like anybody who's just listening here, like it is okay to have certain goals that are kind of outside of your comfort zone, right? It is okay to want to change things about your physique. It's okay to want to change things about your health. It's okay to set certain types of goals that are out of your reach so that you can actively work towards them. And that doesn't mean that you can't accept yourself and your body. I am very comfortable with my body, with where I'm at right now.
But you're still working to be better with your body.
Exactly.
In other areas. And, I think like you said it perfectly, and I feel like Jordan Peterson has a quote that I feel like kind of covers this really well. Probably not directly, but the way I apply it, I feel like it makes sense to me, and it's find the largest burden in life you can bear and bear it. And it's basically saying that your entire life is worth like working towards something. What are you gonna do for the rest of your life? Just like be complacent? And yeah, that's okay every once in a while, but I truly think that like I don't think that man could live in a utopia, because we're always gonna want to we're always gonna want to like strive for more, or you know, solve problems, become better in X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, if anybody's read any history on people who try to achieve utopias, that doesn't end very well. Yeah. But just in general, like we need something, and whether that's, you know, you're working on your personal relationships, you're working on your business, you're working on your relationship with food, you're working on your physique or your performance, and all these things can rotate. You know, there's certain times where certain things take precedence, right? If we're, you know, a few weeks out from some kind of a competition, that's going to take precedence, right? Other times it's like, hey, my nutrition's kind of on the back burner, so to speak, but I'm still, you know, following my healthy habits. And that's where we're going to talk about that on the next podcast a little bit more. But that's where you have to set up those baselines. You know, baseline. Borders?
Limits.
Baseline?
Baseline is like...
I'm like, okay, synonyms. Like, I'm just Google synonyms really quick. What is my brain trying to process right now? I'm just trying to like speak German at this point. Just kidding. I know like 6 words. But they're so useless, dude. They're like not even helpful words.
But I mean, going off that point, like I worked with someone who basically like they were all in with like fitness, and like they were on top of everything, and they like were in the best shape of their lives, and then something else took precedence, but they just kind of threw everything out the window, and they look right now totally different. And it's kind of like starting at ground zero. Like, don't really remember like what foods are healthy for me, because it's been so many years where it's just kind of like that extreme mindset where I'm like not going to care about my health at all. And it's actually been a lot of fun kind of like seeing this person progress and getting back into it, and like balancing a very successful work life and, you know, their health and nutrition, and just kind of saying, hey, you can put things first, but you don't have to throw this away either. Yeah,
and that's where that education piece comes in. We always harp on that so much, but that really is the foundation for everything, right? Like it literally, you know, I have people ask me, you know, all the time, right? Like, hey, well, what should I be eating? Or like, what, you know, for a specific goal. I don't know, how much are you going to pay in taxes this year? I don't fucking know. You need to give me some kind of like feedback, right? So you can't give somebody some kind of like magic formula for like what they should be doing. And you also need to teach people certain things too, right? Like, this is what we always go over. Like, it doesn't have to be this incredibly rigid thing. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to go from, hey, I'm tracking every single thing to the gram. If a piece of rice falls off the bowl, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. To, hey, I'm just going to hit up the drive-thru every meal because I don't want to even think about healthy food. Like, no, whoa. We need to have somewhere in the middle here. And there's going to be times where you're focusing more on your diet. Sometimes you're focusing more on your training. Sometimes you're focusing more on completely other things. But in the back burner, if you've built up those quality habits, you're going to be able to rely on those in times of stress, in times of other things happening. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person for wanting to change certain things about your health or change certain things about how you look and how you feel. And that's what I think is the hardest part about this whole movement, is that it can get so polarized so quickly. And it's like, you know, especially if somebody, you know, I've even heard of people who like, they were, you know, they talked about this a lot, and then they like wanted to change something, and then people were like shaming them for like wanting to like change their body or do something. And like, did you see, like, I didn't follow it like to the T, but I guess Adele like lost a bunch of weight, right? I don't know.
I know, like I've seen that picture circulating, like 2010 versus 2020.
Yeah, whatever it was. So like she was, I think, a little bit overweight. Like I don't know exactly like what she looked like before. And then, you know, this pictures came out, and she'd obviously like lost weight. And then people were like, well, you should have just stayed out. Why didn't you like yourself before? And it's like, first of all, you don't know anything about this person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Clearly, like, you guys, like, unless anybody personally knows Adele and her page,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
how did
you don't,
she feel?
how did she feel at this other body composition? Maybe she wanted to do this, like, and congratulations for her. And then, like, it's not that we're applauding or anybody's applauding her thinness.
Right.
It's just like, hey, congrats, like, you did this because you wanted to, you know what I mean? Now, maybe Adele has a crippling eating disorder that we don't know about. Like, I don't know these things, right? But you can't shame people for wanting to change something.
Right.
And if that is going to make them better. Of course, there's like, hey, like a layer, right? Because there's, you know, especially for people who are competitors, or especially people who are a little bit more extreme by nature, you know, then they might hear that and go, okay, well, I should be stage lean all the time, or I should be at peak, you know, performance all the time. It's like, no, that's not possible either. You know what I mean? Like, we still have to, like, work within the limits of physiology.
Right.
But maintaining a healthy lifestyle and a healthy body composition for you, doesn't matter what the weight is, doesn't matter what like, everybody's gonna be different there. Even if you listen to the I think it was the last podcast, with Dr. Campbell, we did the body fat podcast, body fat testing, because I got so many questions about that. Literally, and he said it perfectly, he's like, literally somebody could be, two people could be 15% body fat. It's me measuring it, same practitioner, same devices, and the two people could look completely different. So that's to this point, you know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't be basing things off of strictly numbers, and that's fine. But we also need to make sure that we're not completely discouraging people or shaming people for trying to change something about themselves or to ultimately be healthier people.
Yeah, I think, like, the thing I've been seeing a ton lately, and one of my clients will know who she is, like, when I say this, but and, like, I think she'll be totally fine with this because I love her to death. But sometimes she'll post, and I've seen other people do this too, post like before and after pictures, or like throwback Thursday pictures, and then they always start it with, first of all, I don't care which one you like me better at. Like, that's not, and, you know, I think that people, like, social media has been so like, oh, I thought you were beautiful, like, without makeup, or I thought you were beautiful 30 pounds heavier. Like, they don't care, because they don't care what you think. It's what is going to be best for that individual. You don't know what's going on mentally. You had to look at their blood work, you know, like, at that heavier weight or that very thin weight, you know. So it's very individualized. And to say that, you know, no one should work toward a better health or body composition, whatever that looks like for them, I think is just not the right way to go about it.
Yeah, and I really think it's missing the point of, you know, a lot of people do need help and do need education with their diet, with their lifestyle, with their training, with their habits. They do need help there. So we can't just say, like, the people who are condemning this are oftentimes people who've had years of experience. You know what I mean? And to then say, like, oh, I didn't need that, it's like, well, you might not have been able to get there without that experience, without that foundational education. So, kind of a different topic, I know, than what we normally do. And this, again, is super complex. And we just barely scratched the surface here, you know what I mean, of everything. And I'm sure there's so many other points that we could touch on. But the next podcast, we are going to talk a little bit about balancing that kind of flexibility and restraint, and really, like, how you do that, and really kind of what different types of restraint look like. So, if you guys like this episode, please let us know. You can leave a review, you can subscribe, do all that jazz, 10 stars. And if you guys have any questions for us, or you'd like to apply for coaching, you can go to teamlocofit.com. Everything is on there, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye.